The shift happens without announcement. There's no single moment you can point to, no event that marks the change. You simply notice, at some point, that something is different. The urge to explain yourself has faded. The need to make sure others understand your choices has grown quiet. You're still the same person, but something inside has settled. You're in a conversation, and someone misreads your intentions. A year ago, you would have corrected them. You would have offered context, walked them through your reasoning, made sure they saw you accurately. Now, you let it stand. The impulse to clarify is there for a moment, faint, and then it passes. You move on. This kind of silence feels different from the silences you've known before. It's not the silence of defeat. It's not the silence of someone holding back. It's the silence of someone who has stopped needing the conversation to go a certain way. People around you might notice the change. They might call you distant or reserved. They might wonder if something happened. And in a sense, something did happen. But it wasn't an event. It was an accumulation. Years of trying to be understood. Years of offering explanations that didn't land. And then, gradually, the realization that understanding was never something you could create through effort alone. The shift is easiest to recognize in hindsight. You look back and see the version of yourself who needed to be seen accurately by everyone, who felt unsettled when someone held a wrong impression, who spent energy correcting, clarifying, making sure the record was straight. That version made sense at the time. They were doing what they thought connection required. But somewhere along the way, the math changed. The effort stopped producing results, and eventually, the effort stopped feeling necessary. What remains is something simpler, a willingness to be misunderstood by some people, a comfort with the distance that creates. You haven't stopped caring, you've just stopped requiring everyone to see what you see. Explaining yourself used to feel like a bridge. If someone didn't understand you, words could close the gap. Context could clarify. Enough detail, delivered carefully enough, could bring them to where you stood. This belief runs deep. It starts early. As children, we learn that explanation is the path to being known. We tell stories about our days. We describe our feelings. We offer reasons for our choices. And often, it works. People listen. They understand. The gap closes. But at some point, usually without warning, you begin to notice the exceptions. The conversations where you explain clearly, and the other person hears something different. The moments where you offer context, and it's received as excuse. The people who seem to listen, but remain exactly where they started, unmoved by anything you've said. At first, this feels like failure. Your failure. You assume you weren't clear enough. You try again, with different words, more detail, a new angle. And when that doesn't work either, you try harder. This can go on for years. The belief that understanding is always possible, if only you find the right approach, keeps you returning to conversations that go nowhere. Keeps you investing in people who aren't investing back. Keeps you speaking to walls, hoping the walls will soften. The turning point comes when you finally see it clearly. Some people are not listening to understand. They are listening to confirm what they already believe. Or they are listening for something to argue against. Or they are simply waiting for their turn to speak. In these conversations, your words don't build bridges. They just disappear into space. Once you see this, the relationship between explanation and understanding starts to come apart. You realize that explanation assumes a listener who wants to receive what you're offering, and that assumption doesn't always hold. This is when silence begins to make sense. Silence stops feeling like retreat. It starts feeling like accuracy, like the most honest response to a situation where words have lost their function. You still speak when speaking matters. You still explain when explanation can land, but you've become selective. You notice, before you begin, whether the conversation has room for what you're about to say. And when it doesn't, you let the silence stand. This selectivity changes things. Conversations become shorter. Some relationships grow quieter. People who are used to receiving your explanations may feel the absence. They may interpret it as coldness, as withdrawal, as you caring less. But from where you stand, it feels different. It feels like conservation, like finally keeping something for yourself instead of pouring it into spaces that can't hold it. There's a difference between leaving someone and creating distance from them. Leaving is permanent, final, a door that closes. Distance is something else. Distance is space held intentionally. It can shift. It can be maintained. It doesn't require an ending. When you begin creating distance from certain people, it's easy for them to misread it. They might see punishment. They might see rejection. They might assume you're hurt and waiting for something, an apology, an acknowledgement, a repair. But distance, the kind that comes from clarity, isn't about any of that. It's a measured response to something you finally allowed yourself to see. Some relationships, despite their history, despite the care that may still exist, have reached a point where closeness costs more than it gives. This cost isn't always obvious. It's rarely dramatic. It's more like friction. Conversations that require constant adjustment. Interactions that leave you slightly depleted. The low-grade effort of being close to someone who doesn't quite meet you where you are. For a long time, you may have absorbed this cost without question. Relationships require effort, after all. People are complicated. You told yourself this, and you kept showing up, kept extending, kept closing the gap from your side. But at some point, you notice the imbalance. You notice that you're doing most of the adjusting, that the effort flows mostly in one direction, that closeness has become something you maintain rather than something you share. Creating distance in these situations isn't cruelty, it's honesty. It's the recognition that you can't force mutuality into existence. That closeness, real closeness, requires two people moving toward each other. And when only one is moving, what you have isn't closeness, it's performance. Distance becomes a form of respect. Respect for your own capacity, respect for the limits of what you can sustain, and in a strange way, respect for the other person too. Letting them be who they are without constantly trying to reshape the relationship into something it refuses to become. People who have known you for a long time may struggle with this. They remember when you were more available, more willing to extend, more tolerant of the friction. They might interpret your distance as change, as loss, as something having gone wrong. And something has changed. But what changed isn't your capacity for closeness. What changed is where you place it. You've become selective about who receives your presence, not out of judgment, out of clarity about what presence actually costs. Once you arrive at this place, something becomes evident. You're not going back. This doesn't mean the door is closed. Doesn't mean you've lost the ability to be open. It means the thing that used to drive you, the need to be understood by everyone, the need to explain, the need to maintain closeness even when it wasn't being met, has run its course. The old pattern made sense when it made sense. You were doing what you knew, reaching toward others, explaining yourself, offering access. These were strategies for connection, and sometimes they worked. But strategies have lifespans. What works at one stage stops working at another. And when you outgrow a strategy, you don't typically return to it. You find something that fits better. What fits now is simpler. You speak when speaking matters. You stay close to people who meet you. You let others hold whatever version of you they're going to hold, without needing to correct it. You've stopped managing perception. You've started living instead. This might look, from the outside, like you've become harder to reach. And maybe you have. But from the inside, it feels like the opposite. You feel more available to the things that actually nourish you, more present in the spaces where presence is received. The energy you used to spend on explanations that went nowhere is now yours to use differently. There's a stability here that's hard to describe. It doesn't depend on agreement. It doesn't fluctuate with how others see you. It's internal, settled, the kind of ground you can actually stand on. You might still wish certain people understood you better. You might still feel the distance and know what it cost. But you won't return to the old way. You won't chase understanding from people who aren't offering it. You won't keep extending toward those who only move away. This stage doesn't reverse because the thing that drove the earlier behavior, the anxiety of being unseen, has finally eased. And once that eases, you don't rebuild it on purpose. You rest in what's left. What's left is enough. A clear sense of who you are, a few relationships that actually hold weight, and the quiet knowledge that you didn't lose something by going quiet. You found it. You didn't become cold, you became clear. And clarity, once it settles, tends to stay.